Thanks for joining me. Good to see you. I'm Jerrel. I develop games full-time for a living. I'm just in the middle of my work day here, but I wanted to take a look at this trailer that Nintendo just released via their Nintendo Today app. This trailer shows Pokémon Scarlet and Violet running on the Switch 2 at 60 frames a second, full HD. It looks really fantastic, whatever resolution they're running the game at. I want to share my analysis of this video as a game developer and point out some improvements, some minor visual enhancements, anything that's different from the previous games. I've covered this game a bit in the past as well. So unfortunately, the two versions that we have, we'll take a look at the trailer here, are quite blurry and low quality. One version was shared by Cerebi.net. It's quite low resolution and blurry, so I paid a man in one of those small European countries to sit in the back of a movie theater with a video camera recording the screen, so that version is higher quality, but it's also quite blurry. So we'll take a look at two versions of the trailer here. Now, alongside my game development work, I also do work in the industry. Recently, I've been very busy taking on more contracts with other companies as brand management, marketing, public relations, consulting on a number of different business and industry topics, training and education, public speaking. So if you need to get a hold of me, you can ask your mother. She has my phone number in her phone. Let's go ahead and take a look at the trailer for Pokémon Scarlet and Violet running on the Switch 2. First, we're going to go ahead and take a look at this bootleg version that was recorded by the guy in some small European country. We'll go ahead and start that from the very beginning, and we'll see. I don't know if I can just pause it at just the right time before there's this bright flash here, but already this is quite telling that it looks significantly better than the Switch version. It's a bit blown out here. Now, these shadows that we see here are being cast from pretend clouds that don't exist. They are not real shadows. They're what we call blob shadows or blob casting. It's a very simple method of projecting pretend shadows onto a surface, and they basically have infinite distance. They're not being culled. These are quite easy to render, so they don't impact the frame rate that much, but there's something about this that looks a bit better. You can still see tiling on the cliff walls here, but they've implemented I don't know what's going on here, if they've implemented any other visual techniques, but the tiling is less obvious on the cliff walls, which I'm quite shocked by. Here we have the character running through the environment. From what I can discern, the grass is still being culled at a particular distance, which means that after a certain distance from the viewing camera, the grass is no longer being drawn, no longer being rendered. It does not look like that distance has increased. I thought the distance would increase, but it doesn't seem like it. Now, something I've noticed here, it's quite hard to tell, especially in this bootleg version of the trailer, but it looks like there is a bit more complexity in the shader for the cliff wall. It looks like it's catching reflections. The reflections are most likely not real time. They're being, taken from some sort of reflection map. But it seems to be expressing reflecting colors from the sky. It's not actually reflecting color from the sky. That's just a visual expression when it comes to graphics in games, and it looks like it's doing that. So you can see there's a sort of a blue tint or a hue to that, whereas in the previous games, or in the previous version on the Switch, it looked quite dull. It was very simple in the color. You had the sunlight and then the shadow, and it looked very dull. There seems to be some sense of simulating reflecting the sky color, which looks interesting to me. The Pokemon models, it seems, are no longer being swapped out for lower level of detail. When we draw a model on screen, it has a performance cost, and if there are a lot of polygons on that model, it causes the frame rate to drop, especially if you have a number of different character models on screen. So on the Switch, what would happen is the game would swap out the high level of detail version, the high poly count, for a low poly count version. On the Switch, it was quite noticeable. At this particular distance, you would see it switch from the low quality to the high quality, but I can tell these here are still using high quality, high poly count models whereas in the past, that's not how the game handled it. These would be low poly count versions. So already it's showing that the game can handle high poly count versions. What we are also seeing is the animations for NPCs are no longer being simplified at a distance. We're going to go ahead and let this run, and you'll see that the animations for this character are not stuttery and jittery as they were on the original version on the Switch. And I would like more confirmation on that. We'll take a look at the other version of the trailer as well. But this is quite interesting. You can still see very visible tiling here on the mountains or on the cliff wall itself. It is possible that shadows are being drawn at a greater distance. In particular, I just tested on the original version of this game, shadows would stop being drawn actually right about here. We would no longer see shadows being drawn, but I believe this Pokemon is still casting a shadow. We can see the terrain. The terrain itself is casting shadow at a distance. So this is a huge difference. This is actually going to make the game look significantly better. One of the problems why it looked so primitive on the Switch is that shadows were being culled about here. And that meant that the backgrounds, not the backgrounds, the terrain looked very dull because the terrain was not casting a shadow on itself. It looked very cheesy and simple. It looked like a Nintendo 64 game. So here we can see that the shadows are being drawn at a massively farther distance. The game will look significantly better because of that. You can see even shadows. This is not something that you would see on the original version here. You have shadows being drawn here, shadows being drawn there. There's no way the original version of the game would be drawing shadows at that distance. That is a huge, huge improvement. We still have very simple lighting, though we don't have, it doesn't appear to have any sort of volumetric lighting or advanced simulation of the atmosphere, but we can see significantly higher resolution on the cliff wall textures, the terrain textures, and there seems to be a bit more complexity in the expression of color. This comes down to more processing of reflections. Here we see they're trying to show us that there can be a significantly higher number of Pokemon on screen at a time, and see if we can confirm shadows being cast. It's hard to tell. We may be seeing footage that's taken from different builds of the game because I expect to see shadows being cast from these trees here. I'm not really seeing them at this point. So I believe that we are seeing different builds. The footage here is coming from obviously they're still improving and working on the game. We see quite smooth animations on the NPCs in the background. They do not appear to be culled that much. And if you download the Nintendo Today app, obviously I'm not trying to convince you to download the app, but if you want to see the highest quality version of this, then the Nintendo Today app is the only way to do that. And you can see it runs so smooth, high resolution, 60 frames a second. It just looks great. So I haven't actually finished this game because the frame rate did, in parts like the Area Zero, it just made it a bit unpleasant to play. I don't have plans on picking up the Switch 2 at launch as I'm very busy with my work. I'm finishing up a number of games. Maybe in a few months I'll pick up the Switch 2 just so I can enjoy some games in higher resolution here. So let's go ahead now. We're done with that bootleg version. Let's go ahead and take a look at the version that was shared by Sarah B. Now you can see this version is quite heavily compressed. It's quite a bit blurry, but we don't have that haloing effect that you get from a man in a small European country sitting in the back of the movie theater with a video camera filming the screen. So it's really hard to tell because it's so blurry, so compressed. It's hard to tell how far the shadows are being cast here. Let's go ahead. We'll just let this run through. I'll put links to the full videos in the description, but I'll just let it run a bit and you can see how smoothly the game runs here. Yeah, it's quite interesting to see this. It's great to see that the Switch 2 can handle all these fancy particle effects without any slowdown or anything like that. I would like to see more improvements. One weird, very odd issue that the game had on Switch was this very odd updating and stuttering of the lighting system, and the shadows would sort of just inch across, and you can see this harsh stuttering movement. I'm wondering if the developers have addressed that. Because the camera's constantly moving in this trailer, it's very hard to tell if that's still going on. You can see the trees casting higher resolution shadows here. So we do get a look at that. The trees are casting higher resolution shadows. The shadows being cast by the player and the Pokemon are higher resolution. So shadows will be higher quality here, better quality on some things here. Let's see. Oh, those are, I see now. Okay, those are, I might be mistaken. Those look like those are the blob shadows being cast and not terrain shadows. Okay. I may have to make a correction. It's very hard to tell. We don't get a lot of time looking at this, but I think I may have to make a correction to my earlier statement in the video. These appear to be the blob shadows being cast by the pretend clouds that are not actually there. But this here, I think that's also blob shadow. Okay, that's a slightly misleading. And the way that you can tell that this shadow isn't really part of the environment, as if this shadow was part of the environment, it would have the same darkness as this shadow being cast, and as the player enters that shadow, those would be indiscernible. Generally, that's how they work in games. But because you can see the two shadows quite differently, you can tell they're using two different rendering techniques. So this is a blob shadow, and that is a real-time being cast by geometry. As you can see, the shadow being cast by this rock is the same intensity as the player here. So that's a little confusing there, but that's all right. You can see the shadows being cast. Okay, so, but we do know for a fact shadows are being drawn from a farther distance, as we can see from this geometry here. Just barely we can see some shadow being cast there. So shadows, though, are definitely, indeed, being rendered at a farther distance. I would have liked to see some implementation of volumetric lighting, but it does appear to be blending a bit better here. You can see the color just here on the mountains. I hope they improved the rendering of the geometry from a distance. I hope the geometry doesn't flicker out as you turn the camera. So it is noticeable. There are noticeable improvements. It's a bit incremental. I would have liked to see a bit more, just so there's more visual cohesion here, but what we see here is pretty nice. This is going to be a free upgrade for Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I wonder if there's a time limit on that. So this is great. Basically, performance upgrade is great with some minor visual improvements. Nothing earth-shattering. But this is interesting to see. Okay. I will return to my work now. I'm developing a number of titles. I'm taking on a number of contracts doing work for other companies as well. So alongside game development, I also do consulting work, public speaking, training, education. So if you need to get a hold of me, just ask your mother. She should have my phone number. Okay, take care, everyone. I'll see you around. Be well, and have fun playing some games. Get out there and have fun. Go develop some skills, and look forward to playing a brand new generation where frame rates shouldn't be an issue. Take care, everyone. I'll see you.